me, your man, Louie T, here on this LouieTeeNetwork exclusive Command Post. You know what it is. Post up, take command, limited series, long shots with a shot. And what this series aims to do is to highlight undrafted free agents that Washington has signed that I think have a realistic shot of making this roster. And generally, I don't do this. You guys know me if you've been watching me for any amount of time. I generally don't put a lot of stock into undrafted free agents because the likelihood is they're not going to make the football team. But I do think there are some opportunities this year, in particular on this roster, on the back end, at two positions in particular, and we're going to highlight those positions throughout the course of this limited series. So this series will cover 6 players that I think have a legitimate shot of making this football team, and I will release these videos one at a time until all players have been covered, and that will then end the series. I will also release them in the order in which I think these players have a shot at making the roster in terms of best to worst. So the first video release, which is the one you're watching now, is the player that I think has the best chance of making the roster. Meanwhile, the last video, the 6th and final video of this limited series installment, will be the player that I think is the longest shot to make the roster. However, all of these guys have a chance, and that's why we're covering them here. So with that said, we will go through each player, all right? I will talk about them, give you their strengths, their weaknesses, things that they may bring to the table, give you a little bit of background information on these players, and then I'm going to give you a comp, but just not any comp, okay? I'm going to give you a comp to a former Washington player, whether Redskin, football team, or Commander. I'm going to give you a comp so it's easier for you to kind of, in your mind, think about what this guy's going to bring to the table. It's much easier for you to do that if I give you a player that you've watched in the past here in Washington versus a guy that played around the league that you may not really be familiar with. Sound good? Let's get started with the first player that I believe has a legitimate shot to make this team. It's a guy that a lot of you were excited about. I've gotten more excited about him after watching more and more and having, you know, the discussions start to flow. Ron Rivera actually going out of his way to name him, even though Ron didn't actually know his name at the time. He knew who he was talking about. We knew who he was talking about. And of course, I'm talking about, this is a guy without really a position. He's a running back. He's a receiver. He's a return man. Let's just call him a weapon. Kazmeir Allen, out of UCLA, undrafted, signed here with Washington. Let's take a look at UDFA Confidential. Kazmeir Allen.
Confidential.
So Kazmeir Allen is a guy that's 5'8", 176 pounds, ran a 4.53 40. He's a redshirt senior that came into the league this year. And this is a guy highly talented, obviously very diminutive. You see his stature. He set a California state record with 72 touchdowns in his senior year of high school. So that got him a lot of recognition. Chip Kelly actually is the coach of the UCLA Bruins. And the first order of business for him was to go out and recruit Kazmeir Allen. That was the first thing that he did. He got the job, and the very next day, Kazmeir Allen says he was at my high school talking to my high school coach. So he was definitely on the radar of a lot of teams in the state of California, and he ended up going to UCLA. Despite winning the 100-meter dash in high school with a 10.44, he only clocked a 4.53 40 time. Now, I've cut him a break, and there's a little bit of leniency here with that 4.53. He ran that at his pro day in a rainstorm. It was pouring down cats and dogs, and he ran the 40 anyway. I've already said that I don't think he's a blazer, however. I've already said, watching his tape, he looks like he's 4.53. He looks like a guy that may be 4.49. He doesn't look like – a lot of people thought because of his track background, he was going to run like a 4.33, something to that effect. And I really believe had he run a 4.33 or a 4.37 or even a 4.41 or something, I think he would have gotten drafted. But the fact that he ran a 4.53, people are like, oh, okay, nah, we're good. We can find somebody else. So, that 4.53, I think rubbed some people the wrong way. And watching his tape, it looks accurate to me, but we'll see. Posted career highs at UCLA in 2022. I always like when players leave college football on a high note, playing their best football, because you always want to see guys trending upward. As they continue to get more opportunities, more reps, more comfortable, you want to see them produce at a higher clip. That's what you got from Kazmeir Allen. He was able to post career highs in catches and rush yards and receiving yards in his final year at UCLA. 49 catches, 403 yards, and 2 touchdowns, and also chipped in with 15 carries for 203 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, what really stands out to me are the 15 carries for 203 yards and 2 touchdowns. If you're doing math at home, let me save you the trouble. That's 13 and a half yards per tote. Now, there was a 75-yard run in there, so that absolutely helps. And really, he had all 15 of his carries in 2 games. So if you really want to see him carry the football, I can point you in the direction of those 2 games. Stanford, he had 4 carries in that game. And then the Arizona State game is really all you need to watch if you really want to see the dynamic nature of Kazmeir Allen. Just go watch the Arizona State game. 11 carries in that game, well over 100 yards. There's a 75-yard run. There's another big run that's probably every bit of 40-some-odd yards. Should have scored a touchdown on that run, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on. So does have some dynamic ability, does have some real game-changing ability in space. And so this is a guy that I think is very intriguing if you're a Washington Commanders fan. As we go on to UDFA Confidential classifies. Confidential. So this is classified information, what I'm about to give you. Essentially, this is his pros and his cons. This is a guy that all his pros, all the pros you see will be highlighted by the Command Post burgundy bullet. All of the negatives, the cons, are going to be highlighted by black bullets. So we start with the pro, and we're going to go ahead and go with the sandwich method, the complement sandwich method. A positive, then a negative, and then another positive. Extremely quick twitched with tremendous agility and burst. This is a guy that is, you see the quick twitch nature that he runs with, can change directions seamlessly, able to get in and out of cuts, string them together without losing speed, without having to stop his feet. He's a problem in space, and you can see that, and that's the tremendous agility in the burst. You see the burst when he comes through the line of scrimmage and breaks through that first wave of defenders and gets to the secondary. You see that burst immediately. When he sticks his foot in the ground and decides to get north up the field, it's very quick, fast, and in a hurry. And so he may not be the fastest top speed guy, which is what that 4.53 may indicate, but in terms of getting to his top speed, I think he does it very quickly. Among the fastest I've seen of guys in this particular draft class, it doesn't take him much to get to top speed. So tremendous agility and burst can make guys miss out in space. And I think he does a really good job of setting up blocks, specifically at the first wave at the line of scrimmage as well. Here's a negative. Diminutive stature, obviously 5'8", 176. You couple that with no real position, and it makes him a jack of all trades, but really a master of none. And that's how I think he's gotten overlooked. If you even look at the UCLA way that they utilized him, 15 carries for a guy with his playmaking ability is not enough. And he only touched it, as I mentioned, as a runner in only 2 games. It's easy to forget about Kazmeir Allen and not focus on him getting the football. Another example is he was at the East-West Shrine game. He's one of 5 players that Washington signed or drafted this year that they've brought in that were in the East-West Shrine game. So Washington clearly, they were scouting the East-West Shrine game very heavily, and there were guys that were there that they really liked, and 5 of them ended up on the roster, and he's one of them. They started him out at the East-West Shrine game as a running back and then quickly realized, hey, this guy has receiving ability. So they said he's going to play some receiver in this game as well. And then they said, oh, man, and he can return kicks, so we're going to put him back there to return kicks. And then when the game got started, the quarterback was under duress. They couldn't really set up anything. And so he didn't get any targets as a receiver, barely touched it as a runner, and really only impacted the game as a kick returner. And that's the problem. When you don't have a real position and people want to put you all over the place, it's easy for you to get cut out of the mix. And that's been his issue really his entire career, outside of high school, obviously, with all the touchdowns, the 72 touchdowns in his senior season. But that's part of the reason he didn't get drafted. And that's going to be a struggle for him at the NFL level. If he can't clearly carve out a niche for himself, whether that's on special teams or as a elite gadget player or as a slot receiver, if he can't, or even a running back, if he can't carve out a niche, a real space for himself on an NFL roster, he won't last in the NFL. Another positive. Much more talented as a receiver than the numbers will suggest. He was not a guy that had a ton of touches as a wide receiver, but with more work and craftsmanship, he could be a real asset as a multi-tool weapon. I really believe that he could be like a Curtis Samuel type of guy that is more noted for being a runner in high school, but with more work, and Curtis Samuel has worked at his craft, and now we see he's a really polished and talented slot receiver is Curtis Samuel. I really see Kazmeir Allen having some of those same qualities. If he works at being a receiver, better route running ability, not telling the DBs what he's about to do, and using his quickness, his elite burst, and his wiggle, I think he could be an elite route runner and turn that into a very serviceable NFL career for himself as a return man and a slot receiver. But he's going to have to work at it. But I think he's very capable after watching him. Here's the negative. Despite dynamic nature and space, contact usually ends the play for Allen, hence the low touchdown numbers. He only scored 12 touchdowns in a total of 38 career games. So, you're talking about over every 3 games or so, he's touching pay dirt. And for a guy with his skill set, with elite playmaking ability, he should have been hitting the end zone 20 some odd times. But and there's a play that really bothered me against Arizona State. I talked about one of those big runs he had, and this one was on like an end around. They fake the reverse, he comes around, they toss it to him, and he hits the seam, gets up the field, has a blocker in front of him, and I didn't think he utilized that block properly. He set it up where that defender goes kind of to the outside, the blocker kind of pushes him towards the sideline, and all Kazmeir Allen has to do is cut back behind that block, and there's a defender bearing down on him coming from the inside, but he's probably going to beat him to the end zone. That guy's going to hit him, but his momentum's probably going to take him in the end zone. He's going to score. I think he sees that defender out the back, corner of his peripheral, and he's like, nah, I'm good. And he just kind of jaunts out of bounds. Cut that thing back and score a touchdown, my man. And so I think those type of plays have to frustrate you, because if I'm a playmaker, I know I get inside the 10-yard line and that play ended inside the 10, they're not giving me the ball again. They're going to hand it to the running back. They got DTR at quarterback. They're going to find a way for somebody else to score this touchdown. I did all the heavy lifting. I'm getting in the end zone here. And that's the mindset you would like to see Kazmeir have on a play like that. But again, he's a guy that can break some tackles, arm tackles in particular. But if you hit him with a nice little shoulder, he's probably going to go down. Finally, another positive. Offers special teams value as a return man with a kickoff return touchdown under his belt in his collegiate career, and is willing to be a gunner as well. He's already said that he'll do whatever it takes to make a football team, and that includes being a gunner. He's done it in college before. Not much, very sparingly, but he's done it, so he has experience, and he says, look, you can't teach speed, which he's right about. And so if he's willing to do that, add some special teams return ability to that mix, and if he can prove his worth as a receiver and a guy you can hand it to, there's a roster spot with Kazmeir Allen's name on it here in Washington because of all of the issues we've had with the returns game and just looking for more dynamic playmakers. You can never have enough of them. A guy like Kazmeir Allen, I think, if he's able to have a solid camp, stay healthy, most importantly, stay healthy. Availability is the best ability. I think he's going to have a legitimate shot at making this football team, which takes me to our Washington comp for Kazmeir Allen.
Confidential.
So for me, it's Chad Morton. If you guys can recall and go way back in the time machine, Chad Morton was in Washington, I believe, in 2003 and 2004. Was a dynamic return man we got from the Jets. Could catch it out of the backfield, and obviously was a third down back, a guy you could hand it to as well. I thought that this was the perfect comp for Kazmeir Allen. Morton really cut his teeth in the NFL as a special teams dynamo, but also a guy that you could, do some things with out of the backfield. And I think that's what Kazmeir Allen is right now. I think if Allen wants to separate himself, have a longer career than Chad Morton, and be more prolific and dynamic, he's going to have to establish himself as a receiver. And I think he's fully capable of doing that, which is why I think he's got a legitimate shot of making the roster, not just as a return man, because the return men come and go. And as we see with the rules being changed, the NFL is trying to take the return game out of the league. And so these guys are becoming less and less of a necessity. So Allen is really going to have to mold himself into a really good receiver to keep him having real value as a player that you want to have on your roster. And Morton, in his case, once his special teams luster faded, he was a guy that was easily replaceable. If you're Kazmeir Allen, you have to make yourself indispensable by being dynamic as a return man, a receiver, and as a running back. Anytime you touch it, you have to be dynamic, and if they ask you to play specials, run down and make a tackle, you got to be able to do that as well. So that is my comp for Kazmeir Allen, and that's going to do it for UDFA classified, or confidential rather, Kazmeir Allen. There'll be more of these to come, so guys, stay tuned. Let me know what you think down in the comment section. Does Kazmeir Allen have a legitimate shot of making this football team or not? I think he does, which is why I'm starting the series off with him. Keep your eyes peeled for more UDFA Confidential. Until next time, I'm your man Louie T signing off. You guys have a good one.
LouieTeeNetwork.